Hi again guys, and welcome back to another Big Al Devlin video here at the House of Devlin. Today I'm going to do something I haven't done for a little while, and I'm going to share with you a little bit about historical weapon maintenance. Now you'll notice I've put my gloves on, and the reason for this is I'll be working today on an axe that I helped design and make myself. I hafted it and I I designed the axe head and asked for a local blacksmith over here in England to make it for me in what is commonly known as Damascus steel, but is actually pattern welded steel. I've had it for a number of years now, and in fact there are videos on here on this channel of me making the axe and doing, sort of learning as I go along how to haft it and all the rest of it. But today what I want to do is show you how to just do basic care for your historical weapons, especially if you've left them for a reasonably long period of time. Sometimes, especially when they are high carbon content steels, they can rust just a little bit. Even though you may look after them really well, they sometimes rust a little bit. If you're not doing it continuously, rust can build up a little bit. And I just want to show you how, in basic forms, how to care for your weapons and reverse the rusting process, so to speak. So without further ado, here's my Dane axe, my two-handed Dane axe that I made myself. As I say, this is pattern welded steel, which you can probably see there. The pattern that is on it, showing that it is pattern welded steel, and it's handmade, as I say, by a blacksmith that I contacted at the time when I was wanting to make my own Dane axe. Now I do have a 5.5 foot long Dane axe, which is a lot longer than this. This is only 3 foot, but it's still long enough. I mean, it's verging on the point of being called essentially a bearded axe rather than or even possibly, I mean, you wouldn't build this one-handed, but it's getting close to it. But it's a very short two-handed axe. But what I will be doing in a future video, not this particular video, is I'll be rehafting it on a haft that I've treated and prepared. So when you get wood, you can obviously, put wood treatment into it to prevent rot and decay, and then over that you can put like a stain, a varnish, and then a stain normally. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to possibly replace the old haft that I've got in here with this haft, and you can see how much longer it is. Now it won't be necessarily that much longer the axe, because a lot of this will sort of be excess wood which will need to be cut away, because it's actually not the wrong size as such, but it would not fit until it kind of gets in here nice and snug. So it will be about the same length, maybe a little bit longer, but it will be a new haft, and that's what I'm looking forward to doing. However, to do basic sort of maintenance on your axe when rust does develop, or you start to see a little bit of discoloration as there is on this, it's basically the same process that you would go through when it comes to polishing your weapons, but maybe with a little bit more sort of heavy duty approach. Now it's a little sometimes hard to do it on a camera, because normally I'd have it a little bit more flat, but basically what you want is a degreaser. Now the cheapest you can get is something like this, like a WD-40, right? There are better degreasers than this. I normally use like an engine degreaser, which is for motor cars and stuff like this, a little bit heavier, a little bit more industrial, and I use that as a sort of, wherever I store them, I might sometimes just periodically go to my historical weapons, and I'll just spray the steel with the degreaser, and it acts to basically keep them in pretty good nick without any real true effort. But occasionally you do need to obviously do a little bit more than just spray them, but you will need a degreaser like this, or better. Okay, what that does is it basically helps remove any moisture that might be on the steel, and it allows for you to basically, if there is any rust, scrape it off a lot easier with your sandpapers. Now I'll show you how roughly to do this, but basically I'm just going to sum it up in its entirety, the process, before doing a little bit in front of you, stage by stage. Obviously this would take probably half an hour to an hour normally, and I'm not going to bore you for that whole period of time. I'll just show you process by process. But basically, you start off with a variety. Once you've degreased the steel itself, you have a variety of different sandpapers. Okay, each sandpaper, you start off with the most coarse, okay, the highest grit essentially, and you then kind of basically get to a much finer sandpaper, until the point where basically it's really fine. I mean, that's just, you can't even see the grain or the grit on that sandpaper at all. It's very minor. If you've got some heavy duty work to do, because you know the weapon really needs a lot of work, you can use files as well, which is what you do in the sharpening process. And files can actually be very useful, say for on the edge of the weapon. If you want to see how to sharpen weapons, I will refilm the old videos I've done, but in the meantime, if you want to watch my old video, you know, you have a variety of files, just like in with sandpaper, going from coarse down to fine, and you just do this basically, and you make your way down into down to a whetstone, which is, and then the polishing at the end, which are that's final stages, and you can do that very well on the edge. It's very good for removing rust off the edge of the weapon, and you can use it elsewhere, but just bear in mind you might scratch your weapon just a little bit. But you're going to be doing that with the sandpaper, but you can buff them out with the polishing techniques that I've described in previous videos, and I will redo for you. So without any further ado, I will progress into the main stages of what to do. So first of all, and I find it's best to do one side at a time, or each profile at a time, and then top and then bottom. So it doesn't really matter what order you do it. And when I do like a side like this, I will start with the main body. I'll kind of split into thirds. I'll do the haft, the centre, and then I'll do the edge. Okay, and that way you get everything, and you go to town basically on it, and make sure that it's all done as well as possibly can be. What I'll do is I will just show you the one side. Okay, I won't do the whole axe, but I'll show you a quick go on all the techniques, so you can mimic yourself for yourself the techniques that I do in this. And then after this, I will be starting the process of rehafting the weapon. So obviously keep your eyes open for that video. So the first thing is I'm just going to be doing the edge to start off with. So I've got a file here, and I'm just going to be just a light filing, and it's up and down. It's not just one motion, one movement. It's up and down, and you want to be keeping roughly a 30-degree angle. So yeah, 30 degrees to the actual body of the blade, be it a sword or an axe or whatever, it doesn't matter. You keep a 30-degree angle, and that gives you a very sharp edge, but nothing too brittle. Oops, getting windy, sandpaper's flying all over the place. What you'll notice whilst I'm doing this, I'm not going like that, I'm going up and then a separate motion back, so it's not that, okay? That is like sawing. You don't want to saw your weapon, okay? One of the main reasons for that is, of course, you want to be maintaining a fairly constant angle. Now you can do this with power tools as well, but this is obviously the by hand approach, but it's not that hard to judge keeping the same angle. You can use your thumb as a guide also, so you know, I'm using my thumb there as a guide, and it will keep me at a relatively similar angle, but you can actually use tools to make sure you're doing it at exactly the same angle with every stroke. So that's how you would do the file, okay? Next will be the coarse sandpaper. Okay, so just checking whether I need to do this. Okay, so again, you'll top it up with more degreaser, i.e. WD-40 or engine degreaser, or a specialised weapon degreaser. Okay, you then take your coarse sandpaper, and then you're kind of basically doing the same motion. You can go a little bit quicker, but if you've got a bit of rust, which for example I've got a tiny, well it's not rust, but a tiny discoloration here, you may find just going up and down isn't enough, and so I would do kind of circular motions around the discoloration or the rust until you get rid of it, or just random movements to get rid of it, and then I would progress with your linear motions. Okay. What this will do is not only remove the rust, but when you're doing the edge of the weapon itself, also it will be sharpening it. So it's a good way to sharpen your weapons at the same time as caring for it. So I've got a discoloration now that I've just noticed, so I'm going to go in circular motions just to get rid of the majority of that. Okay, obviously normally I would do the full length of the blade, and regardless which directions you go, it doesn't really matter on the main body of the blade. It's more applicable to axes, of course, than swords, because swords are a lot thinner than axes. But I would always go towards an edge for your predominant motion. Obviously you will be doing circular motions at points, but that will not be all the time. Okay, so again, a little bit more WD-40. Just check this side, see which side needs some more most work. Okay, so the way I'm holding it is a valid way of holding it pretty much. I find it's a very comfortable way of holding an axe. Don't hold a sword like this, otherwise you'll cut your throat. But normally it's best to try and rest it across, you know, a steady bench, table, chair, whatever is solid and safe. But this is one of the reasons why I'm wearing my gloves, because I have, when I first handled this axe and I was assembling it, I nearly took off this pinky here. And I've got the scar to remind me of it. So whenever I handle it now, apart from when I'm using it, you know, cutting trees or whatever, I always wear my gloves. Especially when sharpening. You'll be surprised, as you're sharpening, sometimes you can get a bit lapped, especially if you've done it a lot, and as you're doing it, you'll suddenly come off the weapon and come back down, and you'll drag your hand across the edge of the blade. It's very possible. Obviously, you can, most of the time you'll get lucky when you're doing that and you won't quite catch yourself, but if you do, you can do some serious damage when you've got a very sharp blade like this. Okay, so again, use then the finer, the next grade of finer sandpaper. Now of course, how many degrees of fineness do you go? Well, I've got 5 different types of sandpaper, so I like to do it gradually. I do most of my sharpening by hand. I do have a power grinder, so I can sharpen weapons, but I normally do use that for putting edges on tools that don't really have an edge, or you know, stock weapons that come blunt. If I want to put an edge on them, I use the power tool to get the angle, and then I'll do the rest by hand. Okay. So again, you do the same thing. If I was doing the body of the axe, you can go like this, but again, it's always best to make your way towards an edge, and you can put the odd rotational movement in there as well. And what you'll find is this is actually very therapeutic. It's quite nice for unwinding and just relaxing, especially on a hot day like today, nice hot sunny day, which we don't get much in England, but if you're lucky enough to live over in America, especially somewhere like California, right, then you can do this all year round. But for me, I can only really do this obviously in the summer, and it's more like 3 days a year. It gets nice like this. Right, and then of course you move to your next finest sandpaper after again degreasing. It's always important to degrease, because what it does, it also not only helps you remove moisture and rust and all that and dirt and stuff like this, but it also adds a protective coat over the steel to prevent further rusting, or delay further rusting at least. And also what it does, it stops heat building up when you're sanding or filing the steel. And this is important because you'll be surprised as you're doing this. Obviously I'm only kind of doing you like a little sample, but as I say, this would normally take possibly up to 2 hours, but between probably half an hour to an hour, depending on how much blade you've got to work with. But when you're doing this, that can really heat the steel up a lot just through sheer friction. And you know, a lot of steels, especially steels like this, forged steel, have been heat treated. And if you go and heat them up again to it doesn't have to be that hot, but if you heat them up again through friction, that heat can build up and it can really mess up the hardness of the steel. So to preserve the quality of the steel, always make sure you've got some kind of lubricant basically on it, which is one of the reasons why we use a degreaser. Okay, now I'm not going to do the other two sandpapers because, you know, I'm going to be boring you. You've seen one sandpaper, you've seen them all. But then the next thing to do is, of course, your whetstone. This is one of your last and final stages. You can end with a very kind of light sandpaper, as I say, like that one I showed you, which is over here, because the wind took it away from me, and that's what I will finish with. Ultimately, this is basically one of your last stages. This is really important. You must always use this with either a mineral oil or a degreaser to act as a lubricant. And in fact, the mineral oil, i.e. baby oil, for example, non-perfumed, is probably one of your best things you can use. Now I use, because it's an axe, okay, a cigar shaped whetstone. You'll see a lot of whetstones as rectangles, possibly spherical, but normally rectangles, or as I say, the rarer kind is cigar. Now the cigar shape whetstone is perfect for anything with a curved edge, so this is typically used, mostly used to sharpen scythes, for example. Because when you've got a curved blade, having this kind of shape allows you to work with the curve a lot easier than a rectangle or a square or something with, you know, that kind of geometry. And the same principle goes again with a whetstone. It's forward and backward motion, linear motion, but because I've got a cylindrical cigar, bless you, cylindrical cigar shaped whetstone, what I can do is, as I'm doing it, it's almost like playing a violin almost, I suppose. It's you're not doing this, but you can rotate along the axis that you're moving. Okay, so you can rotate the stone if you want to get that little bit extra purpose on steel. Now, I don't really recommend doing that, but if you've got a bit of rust, you can do it. Okay, so this is kind of how you would do it if you were rotating, but normally. Now, a lot of ways to deal with a curved blade also is up and down along the edge, okay? That's perfectly fine. In fact, I would mix the two together a little bit to get the finest edge that you possibly can, and to remove any shit that might be on your blade, okay? And that really finishes us off. I just want to do this side quickly on. I noticed a bit of steel from this side had gone onto here and dirtied it. So sharpened that. You can see it's gleaming now, and cleaned it off. And I must admit, I'm rather attached to this haft. It's a lot better than I remember it actually. So I may keep it on, but eventually I probably will replace it. If not, I will replace it anyway, and I'll show you how to do that as and when I come to it. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you soon.